Life is strange, isn't it? The world that's been defined for us by others doesn't always match the reality we often encounter firsthand. My name's Kieran Stanislaw Mace. My friends call me Stan, and I've always been fascinated with the concept of the paranormal, the idea that there is a world beyond the world that's been defined for us. My life has been quite dramatic, to say the least, and I've been confronted with things that completely destroy certain ideas that have been presented to us about ultimately what life itself is, about what's possible, about what's understood, what consciousness is, what living really is. It's a weird conversation to have, and I hope this will be the first of many paraTHOUGHTS videos where I simply discuss ideas that have been floating around for quite some time, and I'm on this journey. I've been on this journey for years, journey to understand the world, to ask more questions, to be comfortable with asking the whys, and maybe having to accept the answers that I receive in return. For many years, I was part of a religious organisation, and they believed in a certain entity. They believed in a certain story. It was written in a book, and we would study that book every week, and that's fine. You know, that world was okay for me back in my earlier days when I was a kid. And then I was run over by a car. Dramatic turn. This experience completely changed my life, and I can't get my head around how it was even possible. I was in a terrible way, understandably, physically quite badly damaged. And during the time, I was going through a number of different operations, quite serious operations. And at some point, my spirit seemed to have left my body. It's the best way I can describe it, really. Despite me being in casts and physically not being able to walk, I suddenly found myself in the corridor, able to walk. And this corridor was in the hospital itself that I was staying in. I walked down the corridor and entered different wards with different patients in there, trying to get their attention. Nobody would respond to me. Nobody would hear me. I would pull at their clothing to try and get their attention. I couldn't interact with this world, and something just felt quite odd. I continued to look, and I tried to look for my mum at the time, thinking that she was nearby, and she was nowhere to be seen. I went from room to room to room, and eventually I encountered this small room at the end of this corridor. This room was filled with small dark holes, a whole wall of holes in fact, and I couldn't quite decipher what they were. And to the left of me there was a discarded broom, and there were a few different items like, I'm assuming they're kind of hospital equipment, I think, jackets, gloves, things like that really. But in this room something felt wrong, like something really dark was in there, and it felt like something that was so grand and hard to even understand. It's like the room itself was empty, yet it was full, if that makes any sense. The presence in there, I felt like I connected with it, and it was this being. I mean, I don't know if it was death itself, who knows, but this thing, I felt like it offered me this download of information. I felt like it took me all over the universe. Like I saw different planets, different spaces. I even found myself landing in this city. This alleyway, I remember this kind of decrepit old alleyway. Everything was hyper realistic. I could see people stood in this alleyway turning as if to almost react to that, to something that had landed. I found myself almost landing as if I was flying in different places. It's just so bizarre. But anyway, the end of this experience kind of came when I just panicked. I just said, "This is too much. Take me home. Take me home. Take me home." And suddenly, in an instant, I woke up. And it turns out I was unconscious for a few days, I believe, and I just assumed it was a dream because I looked around and saw my legs were still binded. I couldn't move, like my bones were still kind of pretty much broken. And yeah, I just had to just deal with the treatment that I was receiving then. Of course, the drugs I would have had to take at the time would have maybe affected my mental state as well, the way I perceive reality. That has to always be considered. But as time went by, I was physically better. This is like weeks later, and this lovely nurse offered to pick me up put me in a wheelchair and take me out of the ward to, give me a bit of a mind refresher, I suppose, just leaving the area. And I was really excited about it. It was lovely. And yeah, she put me in, took me down the corridor. And the weirdest thing was, I knew this corridor, but this hospital, I'd never been in the hospital before, consciously, in my body even. I, I entered the corridor and knew every single door, every single crack, every single bed placement, and who was in each room because I saw them in this, what I thought, dream. And as she pushed me down the corridor, I recognised more and more details until I encountered the room that I discovered this entity or thing or whatever it was. And I just began to freak out because, yes, the holes in the walls were simply a wall full of washing machines. It's clearly like a laundry room for the ward at the time. So there's doctors' gloves and doctors' coats and various different bits and bobs, really. But I was freaking out because this so-called dream was real. I'd actually operated outside of my body, completely conscious, completely compos mentis, able to interact with reality, at least understand reality. And I had to keep that inside for many years. That freaked me out. It completely changed the way that I perceived the world. And when I eventually left hospital and tried to live a normal life as a young boy, I just couldn't really align with the beliefs that I had. And I struggled for years and years and years, still going to Sunday church to recount the poems and the things that they said. And I just understood that there's so much more to this. Like, what do I do with this? Like, what do I make of this life? And it was only then I discovered the power of why. And this is what I'd like this video to be about, really. It's about reminding others to ask why, to say it's okay to ask why, to start to ask questions. You don't always have to have this pre-packaged philosophy delivered to you, everything delivered to you on a plate. It's okay to ask beyond that. Like, not everybody knows everything. You don't know everything. Just ask questions and seek beyond. And you shouldn't be seen as being a problem to ask, why on earth am I here? I was put into this body for a reason. What is it? What am I meant to do with this life and this opportunity? So at that point in my life, I began to accept this experience that I had, despite spending many years trying to hide it away, really, and try to ignore it. I started by attempting philosophy, really. Like, I've been fascinated by the idea of philosophy, about simply the questioning of life. I was an amateur. I didn't know what I was doing, where to start, really. So I tried a bit of Nietzsche at the time, and Nietzsche's pretty hard to understand. It's written in a very old way, but I just began to kind of just at least touch, break the surface, so to speak, just to understand that, okay, there are other ways of perceiving the world, other ideas to introduce yourself to new concepts. And I tried it. I kind of failed initially, but I just gave it a go. But I was just really happy that I began to expand my mind. I watched a lot of Chris Williamson videos, Modern Wisdom. Again, he is amazing. I love his intuitiveness, his ability to ask the right questions at the right time. But he is more of a platform to essentially like a gateway to other knowledge. And through his different conversations, I was really interested in his conversation with Jordan Peterson. You can argue as to whether Jordan Peterson is good or bad or whatever, but I don't really care. I'm just more about his way of thinking. His interesting methodical style, I kind of liked. It's kind of interesting to see how he teaches people to put themselves into the third person, to analyze their situations from outside of the situation, if that makes sense. Breaking things down into different sections to get a better understanding of why you reacted that way, why that person reacted that way, and be more open and comfortable with dealing with opposing opinions and learning beyond there. So that's where I went to read 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order. Great books, well worth the time. I'd recommend just taking your time with that book, chapter by chapter. And obviously don't take the titles of the chapters literally. Literally cleaning your room for one of them. It isn't exactly just about cleaning your room, it's about a higher concept, hint, hint. But yeah, I really enjoyed expanding my mind beyond that point and making, I don't know, saying to myself it's okay to seek beyond. Further from that, I started to learn other religions, just to try and see different points of views. I tried to understand a bit of Buddhism, Judaism, Hinduism. I even looked into atheism as well, because atheism was seen as being the big no-no back in the day. You can't believe in the anti-belief, so to speak. But I think they have a fair question to ask. Can you prove to me this thing that you believe in? Can you prove that this God exists? No, you can't. Okay, well, I don't believe you just yet. I mean, that's quite a reasonable thing to do, is it not? But yeah, I just wanted to understand the other side of life. So I looked up, I think Ricky Gervais has some amazing presentations, or lectures really. Um, Stephen Fry, Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is a bit cynical. He's a bit more of the cynical side. So maybe I'll start with Stephen Fry and then move to Dawkins. But again, just another person, another point of view, another expansion of my mind, collating that data, analyzing it, and then using that to apply to myself. What do I believe? What do I not believe? I even tried to attempt to understand Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. That's hard work. I'm not a scientist myself, but that's him explaining his scientific method, his terminology, I suppose, at the most basic level. But even at the most basic level, for a layman, is quite tricky. But I'd recommend giving it a go, because once you get into the flow of the book and understand the way that he writes, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful way of explaining the current understanding of the universe. Um, yeah, and just from that point, I felt empowered. I didn't feel so powerless and afraid of thinking of those experiences that I experienced when I was a kid. Through knowledge, I found power and acceptance, and now I'm at a state now where, yes, I'm still experiencing paranormal things, but I'm approaching them now without fear, more like from an analytical viewpoint, and I'm learning more because of that. And it's like allowing me to confront this fear, because leading back to the start of my story, when I had this experience at hospital, when I left the hospital, I experienced something where an entity of sorts seemed to have followed me for many years. I had numerous nightmares. I was suffering from PTSD at the time. And my experiences often revolved around an entity being in my room at night. I'd wake up from like horrible, horrible nightmares. I'd see something in the corner of the room. Certain points in my house, this is my kind of childhood home, all of us as a family would hear whistling in the house. We'd hear voices. There's even one point where, I mean, this just blows my mind. In the middle of the night, I woke up thinking there was a party. It sounded like a party. I opened the window thinking, oh, it's really annoying. I just want to sleep because, I have school the next day. I'm really tired and so on. And this was like 3 a.m. And I realised that the noise was coming from inside my room. So I assumed, well, maybe next door was having a party, maybe that. But no, it was coming directly from my room. And I could hear the chinking of glasses. I could hear laughing. I could hear conversation, like it was a busy room. It was bizarre. And over time, I was woken up by this noise about 3 or 4 nights a week. And this lasted for a good 2 years. And after a few months of dealing with it, I eventually spoke to my sister about it. She too heard this noise, and it was coming from her room. It just gets weirder and weirder. And as we had the conversation, we asked our mum, okay, can you hear that? And nothing. Her room was completely silent during the night. So yeah, you could argue, okay, well, maybe something was happening nearby. It could have been an echo of sorts. It could be traveling through the vents of the house and stuff like that. But as far as we know, nobody was having a party 3 or 4 nights a week, to our knowledge. We did ask around. Our neighbours were very confused by our questions back in the day, but yeah, things just escalated in that house. I saw like a warping of reality as well. Like in the middle of the day, my room went dark and warped. And I'm not making this up. I really am not. But for years, I didn't want to tell anybody about this because I'm weird enough as it is. But yeah, all of this kind of led me to a point where I felt powerless and completely like at the whim of whatever was going on in my life that I couldn't explain. Because it's not as if you could tell a police officer about it, or your local priest, or your, certain family members. Really, you just had to deal with it on your own and hope for the best. But yeah, this is a reminder as well. You don't have to deal with things on your own. Like, it's okay to talk about these things. Like, you'd be surprised, you know, like I say, people like myself like have now a platform to talk about these things, to reach out through the internet, to share those experiences and feel like they're not alone. So yeah, with all my babbling, I suppose to culminate this, this is just simply a reminder about asking questions. Okay, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to seek beyond when you encounter experiences that you can't explain. Maybe speak to a friend about it. Maybe if you're religious, speak to a priest about it. You know, sometimes it can be a risk though, but it's worth a try. But I found my way through this was simply expanding my knowledge set, getting a better understanding of different beliefs, different points of view, and also kind of getting to the point where you're okay with dealing with opposing opinions. And okay, if somebody says something to you that you don't believe in, you don't automatically become enemies. When people offer you an alternative, an opposing view, it's just another opportunity to see another viewpoint. It is okay for people to disagree and still be friends and learn from each other. And that's the beauty of it as well. That's the second level of empowerment. It's not just simply acquiring the knowledge and getting an understanding of what you know. It's also the second level of understanding of, okay, well, now I can deal with other variables and be okay with those and make peace with those, because rather than, you know, dealing with them as an adversary of sorts. Okay, how dare you have a different point of view? My view is the ultimate view, and it's the view of the entire universe. You should believe in what I believe in, and so on. It's an empowering thing to simply be okay with opposing views. Anyway, that concludes the end of this first video. Stay tuned. I have a few more thoughts to share on the way, and feel free to ask any questions as well in the comment sections below. Like, may include those in future videos if I can answer them for you. Like, again, I don't know everything. I'm here just to share what I know so far. This is what I've been doing through our podcast, and yeah, long may it live, long may it go on, and long may the conversation continue. Stand out. Bye bye.